I'm Leo, 32 years old, and my father handed the company I poured my life into over to my golden boy brother, leaving me with nothing but scraps. Before I tell you how I got the last laugh and watched it all come crashing down on them, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It's always incredible to see how far these stories can travel. It all came to a head on a Tuesday. A rainy, gray Tuesday. The kind where the sky looks like a bruised slab of concrete and the world feels muted. I was in my new office, the one with a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city skyline. It wasn't the biggest office in the building, not by a long shot, but every inch of it was mine, earned with my own sweat and sleepless nights. The coffee from the machine down the hall tasted 100 times better here. The air felt lighter, cleaner. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could actually breathe, drawing in air that wasn't thick with expectation and disappointment. That's when my assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Leo, your father and brother are in the lobby. They don't have an appointment. My heart didn't leap. It didn't pound. It just gave a slow, heavy thud, like a stone dropping into a deep, forgotten well. A full year had passed without a single word, and now here they were, on my turf. Send them in, please, I said, my voice betraying none of the sudden coldness I felt. They walked in, and the sight of them was jarring. They looked like faded photographs of the men I used to know. My father, Arthur, a man who always carried himself with the rigid posture of a drill sergeant, as if his spine were forged from the very steel his company sold, was stooped. His expensive Italian suit, the one that always looked like armor on him, now hung loose on his diminished frame. His face, usually ruddy and confident, was pale and etched with lines of sleeplessness I'd never seen before. And my brother, Ethan, the golden child, the one with the MBA, the perfect hair, and the smile that could sell sand in a desert, looked completely lost. The trademark smile was gone, replaced by a desperate, hollow-eyed stare that darted around my office with a toxic cocktail of awe and bitter resentment. They dripped rainwater onto my polished concrete floor, two ghosts from a past I had fought so hard to escape. They stood there in a deeply uncomfortable silence, the two titans of my old life, now looking small and utterly powerless in the reality of my new one. Leo, my father started, and his voice, once a booming command, was now a raspy, uncertain thing. We need to talk. Ethan just gave a short, jerky nod, his eyes fixed on a framed architectural drawing on my wall, a new project I was leading. We're in trouble, Arthur said, finally abandoning any pretense of a social call. The company, it's failing, Leo. We're going to lose everything. He looked at me then, the same man who once told me I was better with tools than with decisions, and his eyes were wide with a plea he was too proud to speak. He was asking the tool man to fix the one thing his golden boy, the great decision-maker, had shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The irony was so thick I felt like I could choke on it. I leaned back in my chair, the expensive leather creaking softly, a sound of success they couldn't deny. I looked at their desperate faces, and I felt a profound stillness. Not the satisfaction of revenge, not the heat of anger, just a quiet, calm emptiness. The storm had already passed for me. For them, the hurricane was just now making landfall. To understand how we got here, how the two men who cast me out without a second thought were now standing in my office begging for a lifeline, you have to understand the foundation they built our family on. You have to go back to the beginning, to the small cracks that eventually fractured everything. Growing up, our family wasn't a democracy. It was a kingdom built on a simple creed. Ethan was born to rule and I was born to serve. The favoritism wasn't a secret. It was the wallpaper, the air we breathed. It started with things so small you'd think a kid would forget. But kids don't forget. They collect injustices like other kids collect baseball cards, memorizing every detail on the back. I remember my 10th birthday vividly. More than anything in the world, I wanted a new bike. A silver, 10-speed Schwinn I'd been staring at in the window of Miller's Hardware for months. I'd dream about it. On my birthday morning, my dad led me to the garage with a grand flourish. And there it was, my old, rusty, single-speed Huffy, but now covered in a sloppy coat of royal blue paint. He'd even painted over some of the rust spots. "Good as new, son," he'd boomed, clapping me on the back so hard I stumbled. "See? A little elbow grease and some hard work makes anything right again." 2 weeks later, on Ethan's 12th birthday, a brand new, gleaming silver 10-speed Schwinn, the exact one from the shop window, was parked in the driveway with a giant red bow on the handlebars. No elbow grease required. I looked at my dad, my 10-year-old heart a tangled knot of confusion and betrayal. He just shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "Your brother's older, Leo. He needs a better bike to get around with his friends." Ethan was 2 years older. The logic was paper-thin, but in our house, my father's word was law. It wasn't just bikes. It was everything. Another memory that's burned into my mind is from the 5th grade science fair. Our project was to build a model of a sustainable house. I was obsessed. I spent a month in the garage, using scrap wood and parts from old radios. I built a miniature house with a working water wheel made from plastic spoons that powered a tiny LED light. I even made little solar panels from foil and wire. It was my masterpiece. Ethan's project was a hastily assembled volcano made of papier-mâché, the kind every kid makes. The night before the fair, his volcano collapsed into a soggy mess. He had a full-blown meltdown. My mother, ever the peacemaker, suggested a solution. "Leo, your model is so wonderful," she'd said, her voice gentle. "It's big enough for 2 names, isn't it?" So, the next day we stood in the school gymnasium next to our project. When the judges came by, Ethan, with his natural charm, took over. He spouted a bunch of terms he'd memorized from a textbook the night before, pointing at my water wheel and my solar panels as if he'd invented them. I just stood there, silent and invisible. We won first prize. The trophy sat on Ethan's dresser for the next 6 years. When people came over, my dad would point to it and say, "Ethan's a real innovator. Always has been." This set the pattern for our entire lives. Chores were my domain. I was the one mowing the lawn in the blistering summer heat, fixing the constantly leaking faucet under the kitchen sink, patching holes in the drywall from Ethan's carelessness. Ethan's one and only job was to focus on his studies. This usually meant he was in his room, the bigger of the 2 bedrooms, of course, blasting video games while I was outside, my hands covered in grease or dirt. My mother, before she passed away when I was 16, was the only one who seemed to notice. She was a gentle, quiet soul who saw the profound imbalance. She couldn't change the tide, but she could create small islands of validation for me. She'd sneak me an extra slice of pie or praise a repair I'd made, whispering, "You have such clever, capable hands, Leo." But my father's voice was always louder, a constant pronouncement of our designated roles. "Ethan's got the brains," he'd announce at family dinners, raising his glass. "He's the one who's going to take this company into the future." Meanwhile, I'd be the one who'd just spent an hour of my evening fixing the garbage disposal that had choked on a chicken bone. No one ever raised a glass for that. I learned my place early on. My value wasn't in who I was, but in what I could fix. I was the family handyman, the reliable one, the one you called when something was broken. Ethan was the one you invested in, the one you praised, the one you showed off. He was the future. I was just the maintenance crew, tasked with keeping his kingdom running smoothly. And for the longest time, I foolishly believed that if I just worked hard enough, if I just fixed one more thing, my father would finally see me, too. The gap between me and Ethan, which was a crack in childhood, widened into a canyon during our college years. The difference in my father's expectations for us became glaringly, painfully obvious. Ethan went off to a respectable state university to get a business degree, a path my father had not just encouraged but practically paved for him in gold. Arthur Mechanical paid for his tuition, his housing, his car, and his generous allowance. I, on the other hand, went to a local community college for a 2-year associate's degree in mechanical engineering, paying my way by working evenings and weekends at a local auto shop. My father saw my choice as practical but unambitious. "It's a trade," he'd say with a shrug, as if the word left a bad taste in his mouth. The real moment of truth, the one that stripped away any remaining illusions I had, came during Ethan's junior year. He got caught red-handed, plagiarizing a major paper for his business ethics class. The irony was apparently lost on my father. When the dean called, threatening expulsion, Arthur didn't get angry at Ethan. He got into his car, drove 3 hours to the university, and, as he later boasted at a family barbecue, handled it. His version of handling it involved spinning a sob story about the immense pressure his brilliant son was under and a simple misunderstanding of complex citation rules. This was followed by a very generous, 5-figure donation to the business school's new library fund. Miraculously, the problem vanished. Ethan was given a slap on the wrist and allowed to rewrite the paper. That night at dinner, my father wasn't ashamed. He was practically glowing with pride. "See, that's what I'm talking about," he declared, pointing his steak knife at Ethan for emphasis. "That's business acumen." He faced a crisis, found a resource, in this case another author, and leveraged it to meet a deadline. A little rough around the edges, sure, but that's thinking like a boss. Problem solving. I just stared at my plate, the food tasting like ash in my mouth. My brother had cheated. He had violated the core principle of academic integrity. But in my father's twisted worldview, he had demonstrated executive potential. A year later, I made a decision of my own. I was doing well in my classes, pulling straight A's, but I felt a growing disconnect between the theories in my textbooks and the real world. I wanted to see how these systems actually worked, how they broke, and how they were fixed under pressure. So, I decided to take a year off from school to work full-time as an HVAC technician for a rival company. I wanted to get my hands dirty. I wanted to understand the guts of the machines and the business our family company was built on, from the ground up. When I told my father my plan over the phone, the silence on the other end was heavy and cold. Then came the explosion. "You're doing what?" he roared, his voice distorting through the receiver. "You're throwing it all away for what? To crawl around in dusty attics? People who take a year off never go back. Leo, this is a loser's move. It shows a lack of discipline, a lack of focus." I tried to calmly explain my reasoning. "Dad, this is focus. This is about learning the business from the inside out. How can I ever design better systems if I don't intimately understand how and why they fail in the real world?" He wasn't listening. He was on a roll, his voice filled with a righteous, disappointed fury. "Your brother is about to graduate with honors, with a degree that will let him run a company, and you want to be a grunt? You're content with having dirty hands your whole life, aren't you? You're just like my father, a grease monkey happy with his toolbox. I built this company to get away from that, to have something better for my sons." He meant son, singular. The message couldn't have been clearer. Ethan's blatant cheating was spun as business acumen. My earnest desire for practical, hands-on experience was a lack of discipline, and a return to the blue-collar world my father despised. His golden boy could do no wrong, and I, the black sheep, could do no right. That phone call was a brutal turning point. It was the moment I stopped trying to earn his approval and started quietly, methodically planning for a future that didn't depend on it. He was my father, but he was no longer my judge. He was just a man blinded by his own profound biases, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I would one day have to escape his shadow completely. True to my word, after my year in the field, a year where I learned more than I ever could have in a classroom, I went back and finished my engineering degree, graduating at the top of my class. With my diploma in hand, I came to work for Arthur Mechanical full-time. I didn't do it out of family loyalty or a passion for my father's vision. I did it because it was the only path I could see at the time, a way to use my skills on a larger scale. I started at the bottom, just another technician in a company-issued van. I didn't ask for any special treatment, and I certainly didn't get any. For the first few years, Ethan, already installed in a comfortable office, would call me Grease Monkey as a joke whenever he saw me in my work clothes. My father never told him to stop. Over the next decade, I didn't just work for the company. I became its operational backbone. The place ran on my knowledge. I was the one they called when everything went wrong. I remember one crisis in particular. It was a 4th of July weekend, a scorching heat wave. We got a frantic call from the city's data center, one of our oldest and most important clients. Their primary cooling system had gone down, and their server temperatures were rising at an alarming rate. If they overheated, the city's entire digital infrastructure, police, fire, traffic control, would crash. My father called Ethan first, of course. Ethan spent an hour on the phone with the client, talking about mitigation strategies and escalation protocols. He accomplished nothing. Finally, my father called me. I was at a friend's barbecue trying to have a normal holiday. "Get down to the data center," he barked. "Now." I spent the next 18 hours straight in a sweltering, noisy server room. The problem was a cascade failure in a custom controller unit that the original manufacturer no longer supported. 3 of our senior techs had already been there and declared it a lost cause, recommending a full system replacement that would cost a fortune and take weeks. I took the entire controller apart piece by piece on the floor of the server room. Using my laptop and a multimeter, I diagnosed the fried logic board, bypassed the damaged circuits, and essentially rebuilt the unit's core functionality from scratch, writing a new set of commands on the fly. At 3 a.m. on Sunday morning, I flipped the main breaker. The system sputtered, whirred, and then roared to life. The temperature in the server room began to drop. I had saved the city's data infrastructure. The exhausted site manager looked at me like I had performed a miracle. I drove home as the sun was rising, covered in sweat and grime, and fell into bed. The next day, I dragged myself into the office. I expected a thank you, maybe a pat on the back. Instead, I overheard my father on the phone with the mayor's office. "Yes, Mr. Mayor, it was a tricky one," he was saying, a proud chuckle in his voice. "But I have to give credit to my son, Ethan. His quick thinking and management of the situation really saved the day. He's a natural leader." I stood there, invisible, just outside his office door. My 18 hours of desperate, intricate work had been seamlessly transferred to Ethan's long list of accomplishments. That was my life at Arthur Mechanical. I was the ghost in the machine. I designed the custom manifold system that secured the multimillion-dollar North Tech contract, but Ethan got the public credit for his sharp negotiating. I trained every new technician we hired because our official training manuals were hopelessly outdated, but I never received so much as a title change. Customers, however, knew the score. They bypassed the main office line and called my cell directly. "Leo, it's Jim from the downtown high-rise. Don't send anyone else. I need you." My phone was a constant stream of these calls, a secret parallel command center for the company's most critical operations. Frank, one of our oldest and most respected technicians, pulled me aside one day. "Leo, this whole place is a house of cards, and you're the one beam holding it all up," he said, his voice low. "If you ever leave, it's all coming down." I just shrugged, but the thought had already taken root. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was a hostage to my own competence, trapped in a company that fed on my skills while starving my ambition. The resentment in my gut was no longer a slow, cold fire. It was a forge growing hotter every day, waiting for the moment to shape something new, or to burn the whole rotten structure to the ground. The moment the forge finally roared to life came on a gray Monday morning. My father called a mandatory family business meeting in his office. That was always a bad sign. It meant a decision had been made, and my presence was required merely for the proclamation, not for any actual discussion. It was just the 3 of us, me, him, and Ethan. The air in the room was thick with a self-important gravity, and my stomach twisted into a familiar knot of dread. Arthur sat behind his massive oak desk, a throne he had ruled from for 30 years. He had his serious business face on, the one he used when he was about to deliver a verdict. Ethan sat in one of the plush leather chairs opposite him, looking like a prince waiting for his coronation. He had an air of barely contained excitement. He already knew what was coming. I was the only one in the dark. "As you both know," Arthur began, clearing his throat with a sound that demanded silence, "I'm not getting any younger. I've been thinking a lot about the future of this company, about my legacy. It's time to formalize the succession plan. It's time to talk about the inheritance." The word hung in the air. Inheritance. My heart, against all better judgment, gave a hopeful little flutter. After all these years, all the sweat and sacrifice, the 18-hour shifts, the designs I created in my garage on weekends, was this it? Was he finally going to acknowledge my role, my contribution? Was he finally going to be fair? He slid a thick, leather-bound portfolio across the polished surface of the desk. Not towards me, but towards Ethan. Ethan, he announced, his voice swelling with pride. As of the 1st of next month, you will be promoted to the position of Executive Vice President. This is a transitionary role. We will work together for the next 2 years, and then you will assume the title of President and Chief Executive Officer. The company, the legacy, it will all be yours. The air was sucked out of my lungs. I felt lightheaded. I stared at him, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the part of the speech that included me. There had to be something. Partnership? The creation of a Chief Operations Officer role? Something tangible. Something that said, I see you. Ethan picked up the portfolio, a smug, triumphant smile spreading across his face like a stain. He ran his hand over the leather. He didn't even glance in my direction. A cold, heavy silence fell in the room. I was the one who had to break it. And what about me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My father finally turned his gaze to me, and it was like he was looking at a piece of furniture he had forgotten was in the room. There was no malice in his eyes, just a simple, unthinking dismissal. It was 1,000 times more painful than hatred. It was indifference. You're a great supervisor, Leo. The best we have, he said, as if this were some grand consolation prize. You're the heart of our operations. You'll continue in your role, of course. You're crucial to operations, but not worthy of ownership. The engine, but not the driver. The hands, but not the brain. So I get nothing? I pressed, the whisper turning into a raw, angry rasp that scraped my throat. I get no equity? No stake? I've given my entire adult life to this place. I built the systems you run on. I have the personal relationships with the clients who pay your salary, and his. I gestured towards Ethan. You'll be taken care of, he said, waving his hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. You'll have a job for life, a good salary, the best in the field. And after I'm gone, the estate will have a little something for you. Scraps from the table. The loyal dog who gets the leftovers. The rage that had been forged over 2 decades finally erupted. A job. I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the hardwood floor, a sound of violent protest in the quiet room. I don't want a job, Dad. I want what I've earned. I want ownership. I want respect. That's when he delivered the final, fatal blow. He looked at me, his face a mask of patronizing pity and annoyance, and said the words that would sever the final thread between us, forever. Leo, be realistic. You'll never run this place. You're better with tools, not decisions. Tools, not decisions. That was it. That was my epitaph in the family business. That was all I would ever be to him. A useful, complicated, but ultimately replaceable tool. A wrench. A hammer. Something you keep in a box until you need it, and something you never, ever put in charge. I looked from his impassive face to my brother's smug, victorious grin. In that single, searing moment, something inside me didn't just break. It was incinerated. And from the ashes, something new and hard and cold was born. I turned and walked out of the office without another word, the sound of my own blood roaring in my ears, drowning out his world for good. I don't remember driving. It's a complete blank. The rage was a white-hot, blinding force, erasing everything but the echo of those 5 words. Tools, not decisions. When the world came back into focus, I was parked at a scenic overlook, a place I used to go as a teenager to escape the suffocation of my own home. The city was spread out below me, a sprawling map of a life that suddenly felt alien. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. The fury began to cool, replaced by a cold, terrifying panic. My father's words had been a judgment, a final verdict on my worth. For my entire life, I had been the good son, the dutiful one, the one who showed up and did the work, hoping it would one day be enough. It wasn't. It never would be. What was I going to do? I had a mortgage. I had bills. I had spent 15 years of my life becoming the indispensable man at a company that had just informed me I was, in fact, completely dispensable. The fear was a physical thing, a cold hand squeezing my chest. Was my father right? Was I nothing without him and his company? Was I just a guy with a toolbox and no future? Just as the despair started to pull me under, my phone, which I'd thrown onto the passenger seat, buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let the world go away. But some impulse, some flicker of defiance, made me reach over and answer it. Leo? A professional, energetic voice said. Speaking, I managed to say, my own voice sounding hoarse and distant. It's Mark Collins, from North Tech, the voice said. Listen, I know this is out of the blue, but I'm really glad I caught you. Mark, the campus facilities director, our biggest, most important client, the one whose entire campus ran on the custom cooling systems I had designed and maintained. My gut clenched. He was probably calling with a problem, an emergency, and for the first time in a decade, it wasn't my problem to solve. A bitter, ironic laugh almost escaped my lips. Hey, Mark, what's going on? I tried to sound normal, professional. I hope I'm not overstepping here, he said, and I could hear a genuine sense of urgency in his voice. But I'm hearing some weird rumors from your main office. Some chatter that your brother Ethan is taking over as the lead on all major accounts, effective immediately. Please tell me you're still going to be our point person. We've got the big expansion project coming up, and frankly, you're the only one I trust to handle it. I hesitated, the truth caught in my throat like a shard of glass. Actually, Mark, I'm leaving the company. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It stretched for a full 10 seconds, so long I thought the call had dropped. You're kidding me, he finally said, his voice flat with disbelief. Leo, you can't be serious. Let me be blunt. You are the only reason we are still with Arthur Mechanical. Your dad's a nice enough guy, but his company's pricing is 20% higher than your competitors, and their administrative side is a chaotic mess. You are the value proposition. You're the guy who keeps this billion-dollar campus running without a single hiccup. Without you, there is no contract. I was speechless. To hear my worth laid out so plainly, so directly, not as a compliment but as a cold, hard business fact. It was like a defibrillator shocking my heart back into a proper rhythm. It was the validation I had been chasing my entire life, and it was coming from a client, not my own father. I honestly had no idea you felt that way. I stammered, my voice thick. Felt that way? It's a fact, Leo. It's all over my performance reports to corporate, he said. Hold on 1 second. I could hear the muffled sound of him talking to someone else in the background. It sounded like he was making a case, arguing for something. A minute later, he was back on the line, his voice even more energized. Okay, new plan. Don't do anything rash. Don't sign anything. My boss, Mr. Davison, wants to talk to you. He's the Senior Vice President of Global Operations. This is officially above my pay grade now. He wants to know if you can meet him for lunch tomorrow. My head was spinning. The Senior VP of Global Operations? For a tech giant with campuses all over the world? Lunch? To talk about what? About your future, Mark said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Or, more specifically, your future with us. Just be there. The Capitol Grill, 1 o'clock. It's on the company card. I hung up the phone, completely stunned. An hour ago, I was a handyman, a toolman with no prospects, a failure in the eyes of my own father. Now, I had a lunch meeting with a major corporate executive who saw me as a high-value asset. For the first time all day, the gray, oppressive sky seemed to have a sliver of brilliant light breaking through. Maybe my father was wrong. Maybe my value wasn't tied to his name, his company, or his permission after all. The next morning, I walked into the offices of Arthur Mechanical with a spine made of steel. The conversation with Mark had been more than just a job offer. It was a fundamental recalibration of my own self-worth. For years, my value had been defined by my father, filtered through the lens of his favoritism. Now, for the first time, I had an objective, market-based valuation of my skills. And it turned out I was worth a hell of a lot more than I thought. I didn't go to my father's office. I didn't go looking for a confrontation. I walked straight to my own small, cluttered office, sat down at my computer, and typed out the simplest, most professional 2-week notice I could draft. It contained no emotion, no angry recriminations, no lengthy explanation. It was a single paragraph stating a fact. My employment with the company would be terminated voluntarily in 2 weeks' time. I printed it, signed my name at the bottom with a firm, steady hand, and walked it over to the HR department. Then, and only then, did I walk to my father's office and place a copy on the corner of his massive desk. He was on the phone, deep in a conversation about supply chain logistics. He glanced at the letter, then at me, and gave a little nod of acknowledgement, as if I had just handed him a routine supply request form. He gestured for me to wait. I didn't. I just turned and walked back to my office. A few minutes later, he appeared in my doorway, the letter held loosely between his thumb and forefinger. He didn't look shocked or hurt. He looked faintly amused. "Really, Leo?" he said, a small, patronizing smirk on his lips. "A bit dramatic, don't you think?" "I don't think so," I said, not looking up from the work order I was reviewing. He tossed the letter onto my desk. "All right, if this is what you want, take a few weeks to cool off. You know the door is always open. But let me give you some fatherly advice. Out there, it's tough. It's a cutthroat world. You won't last long without the resources and the name we have here. You'll be back within 6 months, cap in hand." He said it not as a threat, but as a simple, unassailable forecast, like predicting the sun would rise tomorrow. "Don't hold your breath," I said, finally meeting his gaze. He just shrugged. "Good luck, son." It was hollow and automatic courtesy, the kind of thing you say to a stranger. He turned and walked away, already moving on to his next, more important task. I spent the rest of the morning in a strange state of calm, detached focus. The decision was made. The cord was finally irrevocably cut. As I was sorting through some old project files, an email notification popped up on my screen. The sender was David Davison. The subject line, "Looking forward to our conversation." The email was brief and to the point. He thanked me for agreeing to meet and said he was eager to discuss a unique and significant opportunity that had opened up in his division. He wanted to talk about a potential promotion into a newly created leadership role, a role that would oversee technical infrastructure and innovation for their entire West Coast portfolio. The word salary was mentioned, followed by a number that made me stop breathing for a second. It was more than double my current pay, not including the performance bonuses he outlined. It was executive-level compensation. I closed the email and leaned back in my chair, staring at the water-stained ceiling tiles of my tiny office. A job for life my father had offered me. A safe, stable position as his top toolman. A gilded cage, where I would always be competent but never in charge. And here, in my inbox, was an offer to build a whole new world. A world where my skills weren't a fallback, but the main event. A world where I wouldn't be a supervisor. I'd be a strategist, a leader, a decision maker. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and walked out of the office for lunch. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I was heading to the Capitol Grill to meet my future. My father thought I was running away from something. The truth was, for the first time in my life, I was running towards it. My lunch with Mr. Davison wasn't an interview. An interview is when they're trying to figure out if you're good enough. This was a recruitment. They already knew I was good enough. They were trying to convince me to bring my skills to their team. It was a completely new and intoxicating experience. He was a sharp, no-nonsense man in his late 50s with clear eyes that didn't miss a thing. He didn't waste time with small talk. After the waiter took our order, he got straight to it. He had a file with him, and inside were copies of every major service report and project proposal I had ever filed for the North Tech campus. He knew my work better than my own father did. "Leo," he said, leaning forward, "Mark says you're the value. I've looked at the data. I've read your reports. He's right. Your manifold design saved us an estimated $200,000 in energy costs last year alone. Your preventative maintenance schedules have resulted in 100% uptime for our critical servers for 36 consecutive months. That's not just good work. That's industry-leading excellence. We don't want to lose that. In fact, we want to replicate it across our entire portfolio. He laid out the offer in clear, unambiguous terms. They were creating a new position, Director of Critical Infrastructure, West Coast. It would be my job to build a team, set the standards, and oversee the efficiency, maintenance, and innovation for all their high-tech facilities from Seattle to San Diego. I would have my own multimillion-dollar budget, full hiring authority, and a direct line to him. It wasn't just a job. It was an invitation to build a legacy. My own legacy. I accepted on the spot. We shook hands over the table. A deal sealed not with a signature, but with mutual respect. Just like that, my life had a new, thrilling trajectory. The next 2 weeks back at Arthur Mechanical were surreal. It felt like I was walking through a movie set of my own life. I was there, but I wasn't really there. My father and Ethan treated me with a bizarre, polite distance. They acted as if I were a temporary contractor whose term was about to expire. They didn't ask where I was going. They didn't ask why I was really leaving. They just assumed I was having a temper tantrum and would come crawling back. Their arrogance was a shield against the inconvenient truth of my departure. I ignored their condescension and focused on my work. I was determined to leave with my professionalism and integrity intact. I spent those 2 weeks creating the most thorough job transfer documentation in the history of the company. I wrote detailed manuals for every custom system I'd built. I updated every single client file with meticulous notes. I personally walked my designated replacement, a nervous young engineer named Kevin, through every active project, patiently answering his endless questions. I wanted to give them no excuse, no reason to ever say that I had left them in a lurch or sabotaged their operations. On my last day, a Friday, I stayed late after everyone else had gone home. The office was quiet. The only sound the low hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. I packed up my personal belongings in a single, sad-looking cardboard box. A few framed photos, a chipped coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Engineer," and a stack of reference books. Then I walked over to my old, gray, metal filing cabinet. I opened the bottom drawer, the one that always stuck, and reached all the way to the back. My fingers found the thick, forgotten folder. The label, written in my own neat, blocky print, read, Flow Optimization Protocol Patent Application #7B. Inside were years of my life. Schematics, test data, efficiency calculations, and lines of code. It was the complete documentation for the custom algorithms I had developed to regulate cooling systems in large-scale server environments. It was my secret sauce, the proprietary process that gave Arthur Mechanical its only real edge over the competition. I had developed it entirely on my own time, on my own laptop, fueled by my own curiosity and obsession with efficiency. The company had paid for the parts and the installation, but the intellectual property, the brain behind it all, was undeniably mine. A year prior, I'd had lunch with a lawyer friend whose home air conditioner I had fixed as a favor. I'd casually mentioned my work on the protocol. He had stopped eating, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Leo, you need to patent that. Now." On his advice, I had quietly filed a provisional patent for the entire process under my own name. It was a defensive move, an insurance policy. I never thought I'd actually need it. I just wanted one thing that was legally, unequivocally mine. I slipped the folder out of the cabinet and placed it carefully into my box. This wasn't theft. I was simply taking what belonged to me. My father was giving Ethan the company, the trucks, the warehouse, the client list. But the company's most valuable asset wasn't on any balance sheet. And it was about to walk out the door with me. As I walked through the empty office one last time, I saw Frank, the old tech, finishing up some paperwork at his desk. He looked up as I passed. "So, this is it, kid?" he asked, his weathered face full of concern. "This is it, Frank," I said. He shook his head slowly. "They're fools. Complete, utter fools. They have no idea what they're losing." "Maybe," I said, shifting the box in my arms. But I have a feeling they're about to find out. I walked out into the cool night air, put the box in the passenger seat of my car, and drove away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. There was nothing back there for me anymore. The future was ahead. And that brings us back to that rainy Tuesday, a full year later. Back to my new reality, where my past had just walked in, dripping rainwater and desperation all over my floor. My father and brother were standing before me, not as titans, but as defendants awaiting a verdict they already knew would be guilty. They laid it all out, a tragic opera of incompetence. Ethan, in his infinite wisdom, had tried to immediately assert his new authority. He'd gone on a firing spree, getting rid of experienced, loyal technicians like Frank, calling them old-fashioned, and replacing them with younger, cheaper, and completely inexperienced kids. He'd ignored my meticulously prepared manuals, convinced he could do things better his own way. The results were catastrophic. The clients are leaving in droves. Leo, Ethan said, his voice cracking with a pathetic whimper. They keep referencing service failures, missed deadlines, things that just never, ever happened when you were here. We hired Kevin to take your spot, but he's not you. No one is. My father, Arthur, jumped in, his tone shifting from pleading to a desperate, misplaced anger, as if this were somehow my fault. North Tech dropped us. They terminated a multimillion-dollar contract with a 30-day notice. They said their new in-house director found significant operational inefficiencies in our service model. Can you believe the nerve? In-house. They built their own team and poached our biggest contract, the one you brought in. I stayed silent, letting them unravel. The irony of him being angry at North Tech for doing exactly what I had done, building their own future, was apparently lost on him. The story only got worse. To try and cover the financial losses, Ethan had made a fatal error. And that's not the worst of it, Arthur mumbled, his gaze fixed on the plush rug at his feet. He couldn't even look at me. There's a legal issue. An invoice. You mean the fraudulent invoice he sent to the federal building downtown? I finished for him, my voice flat and cold. I knew all about it. The building's furious facilities manager, a man I'd worked with for years, had called me personally. Not to ask for help, but to warn me that a federal fraud investigation was being opened into Arthur Mechanical's billing practices. He wanted to make sure my name was kept clear. Frank, who'd kept in touch, had filled me in on the rest. The federal probe had triggered a full-blown IRS audit. They were now tearing through decades of my father's creative accounting, and they were finding all sorts of things I never knew about. How did you know that? Ethan stammered, looking genuinely baffled, as if I just performed a magic trick. People talk, Ethan, I said simply, especially when you've spent a decade treating them with respect, instead of treating them like they're disposable. That's when my father played his final, desperate card. He looked me straight in the eye, his face a mask of a broken patriarch. Leo, come back, he begged, the words sounding like they were being torn from his throat. Please. I was wrong. I was a fool. Everything I said that day, I didn't mean it. The company is yours. I'll sign it over right now. We can go to a lawyer this afternoon. I'll make you the majority shareholder. 60%. 70. Just name your price. You have to help us. This is your family's legacy on the line. There it was. The offer I had once dreamed of hearing my entire life. The validation. The inheritance. The keys to the kingdom. A year ago, I would have wept with gratitude. Now, I felt nothing but a profound, weary pity. I let the offer hang in the dead air for a long moment. Then I stood up and walked to my window, looking down at the bustling, indifferent city below. My legacy? I said, my back still to them. My legacy is right here. It's this office. It's the team I'm building, the one I mentor every day. It's the respect I've earned, not the name I was given. I turned back to face them. Their faces were etched with a desperate, flickering hope. I was about to extinguish it for good. You're right about one thing, Dad. You were wrong. But your biggest mistake wasn't just in choosing Ethan over me. Your mistake was that you never, ever understood what your company's real value was. I walked over to a simple, clean bookshelf against the far wall. And there, in a minimalist black frame, was the official document from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I took it down and placed it gently on the polished surface of my desk in front of them. "You can't give me the company?" I said, my voice calm and steady, devoid of anger. "Because for the last year, the most profitable and critical part of your company has been operating illegally." Ethan leaned forward, squinting at the document's formal, dense text. "Flow Optimization Protocol. What the hell is this?" "That," I explained, tapping the glass over my name, "is the legally registered patent for the software, hardware, and methodology that runs the high-efficiency cooling systems for every single major client you used to have. The system that saves them millions. The system that none of your competitors has ever been able to replicate. I developed it. I own it. And since the day I walked out your door, every time your company has serviced or installed one of those systems, you have been infringing on my intellectual property. A good lawyer would have an absolute field day calculating the damages and royalties you owe me. We're talking millions." The color drained from my father's face. He physically staggered back and sank into one of my plush visitor chairs, his body looking like it had been unplugged from its power source. Ethan just stared, his mouth hanging open, the smugness he had worn like a second skin his entire life finally, utterly gone. He looked from the patent to my face and back again. The gears were turning, slowly, painfully, in his mind. He finally understood. They hadn't just lost their best mechanic. They had been trying to drive a car after its engine had been legally repossessed. You planned this?" Ethan whispered, his voice full of a child's disbelief. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I didn't. I just protected my work. I protected myself. You and Dad, you did all the rest. You destroyed your own legacy. I just got out of the way. This is the moment that changed everything, the moment I finally took back control of my own life. Thank you for sticking with me to this point. You're amazing. Please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you made it this far with me. It not only helps more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey." The air in the room was dead, heavy, and silent. The shock on their faces was total and absolute. It wasn't just the existence of the patent. It was the crushing realization that I had outmaneuvered them so completely, not with rage or a vengeful, elaborate scheme, but with quiet competence and foresight, the very qualities they had always dismissed and taken for granted. Arthur finally found his voice. It was a hoarse, broken croak that was barely audible. "So what now? You sue us? You call a lawyer and take everything that's left? Is that the plan?" I looked at the framed patent on my desk, then back at the 2 broken men in front of me. The thought of a lawsuit, of dragging them through courts and depositions, felt exhausting and pointless. It was a fight I had already won. I shook my head and placed the patent back on its shelf. It had served its purpose. "No, I'm not going to sue you. I don't need your money. Honestly, I don't want anything from you. I just want you to leave. But the company, our family, your mother's memory," Ethan stammered, throwing out a last-ditch desperate appeal. "The company is a sinking ship that you 2 drilled holes in," I said, my voice hard and cold for the first time, cutting through his pathetic plea. This family broke a long time ago. You just never noticed because I was the one down in the basement, constantly patching the cracks in the foundation." I walked to my office door and held it open, a clear, final gesture. "The bridge you want me to cross back over? You burned it with gasoline and then you danced on the ashes. Now, please, get out of my office." They didn't argue. There was no fight left in them. They shuffled out like old men, their shoulders slumped in a defeat that was total and irreversible. As they passed, my father paused in the doorway and looked back at me. His eyes filled with a confusion so deep it almost looked like a child's pain. "I don't understand, Leo," he whispered. "Everything I did, I thought I was doing what was best. I did this for you. For both of you." I didn't answer. I just closed the door softly behind them, the click of the latch sounding like a final, definitive end to a long, painful chapter of my life. I stood there for a long time, my forehead resting against the cool wood of the door, just breathing. I expected to feel a rush of triumph, a surge of ecstatic victory. Instead, I just felt tired, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion, as if I'd been carrying a heavy, invisible weight on my back for 30 years and had only just now, finally, set it down. My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. The caller ID showed a name I hadn't seen in a while. Brenda, the longtime head accountant from Arthur Mechanical. She was a quiet, meticulous woman of 60, sharp as a tack, who had always treated me with a quiet kindness. She had retired a few months after I left, saying she wanted to spend more time with her grandkids. "I heard the old man and his crown prince paid you a visit today," she said, her voice crisp and direct. There was no preamble. "News travels fast in this city?" I replied, a small, genuine smile touching my lips for the first time that day. "Leo, there's something you should know," she said, her tone becoming serious. "The feds aren't just investigating that one fraudulent invoice from Ethan. They're digging into everything, and I wanted you to hear it from me first. I'm the one who made the initial call." I was stunned into silence. Brenda, the quiet, unassuming bookkeeper? Brenda, why? You could have just walked away. "Because I worked at that company for 25 years, she said, and I could hear a lifetime of conviction in her voice. "I watched your father pour every resource, every opportunity into your brother, and treat you like the hired help. I kept my mouth shut because it was family business. But when Ethan took over and started filing fraudulent invoices and trying to get me to cook the books to cover his losses, that was it. That wasn't just bad parenting anymore. It was a crime. He was turning a flawed but honest family business into a criminal enterprise. I couldn't stand by and watch them burn down the house you helped build. I owed it to the company's good name, and I owed it to you." It was the second, unexpected twist of the day. The final push that sent their crumbling empire into the abyss hadn't come from me. It had come from a quiet, honorable woman who believed in right and wrong. She was the unexpected ally, the silent witness who finally decided to speak up, not for revenge, but for justice. "Thank you, Brenda," I said, my voice thick with an emotion that surprised me. "Don't thank me, Leo," she replied warmly. "You earned every bit of the peace you're about to get. Now go build something great, something they can't touch." We hung up, and I walked back to my window. The rain had stopped, and the sun was starting to break through the clouds. A sense of genuine peace settled over me. It was never about revenge. It was about consequences. My father and brother weren't victims of my success. They were simply the architects of their own spectacular destruction. And I was finally free. A year can change everything, can feel like a lifetime. The division I had started at North Tech, the one that began with just me, a desk, and a job title, had grown into a thriving team of 12. We were the Department of Critical Infrastructure, a lean, highly efficient unit responsible for the operational integrity of their most vital assets. My office was no longer quiet. It was a hub of activity, of smart people solving complex problems. I had made a point to hire based on hunger and potential, not just experience. My two best engineers were David and Carlos, brilliant kids I'd hired straight out of college. I saw the same spark in them that I once had, a relentless curiosity, a hunger to learn, to build, to understand not just how things worked, but how they could work better. But unlike my father, I didn't see them as tools to be used. I saw them as assets to be developed. I mentored them, I challenged them, and I made damn sure to celebrate their successes publicly. When David came up with a new diagnostic algorithm that cut our troubleshooting time by 30%, I made sure he was the one presenting it to Mr. Davison. I was building the kind of team I had always wished I could have been a part of. A team built on merit, collaboration, and mutual respect. My work was fulfilling in a way that constantly fixing my father's mistakes never was. We weren't just maintaining systems, we were innovating. We developed new standards for energy efficiency and water usage that were being adopted by the company globally. My name was on reports that went to the board of directors. I had received a significant promotion 6 months in, and my salary was now at a level that, just a couple of years prior, I would have considered a fantasy. I had built a new life, a new career, a new reputation, all on my own terms, brick by brick. As for Arthur Mechanical, it died a slow, predictable, and public death. The federal investigation uncovered years of systematic financial misconduct. My father, it turned out, had been using a series of shell accounts and creative invoicing to hide profits from the IRS for over a decade. Some of these accounts were registered under my deceased mother's name, a final, cynical betrayal that sickened me. Faced with massive fines from the IRS, a federal fraud conviction for Ethan, and a reputation that was now radioactive, my father was forced to declare Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The company wasn't restructured. It was liquidated. Its assets, the fleet of vans I used to drive, the tools I used to wield, the warehouse I used to organize, were sold off for pennies on the dollar at a public auction to pay off their creditors. The grand legacy my father had been so obsessed with preserving had vanished into thin air, a ghost of a company that no one would remember. One Saturday afternoon, about a year after their visit to my office, there was a knock on the door of my new house. It was my Uncle Robert, my dad's younger brother. We had never been particularly close. He was a quiet college professor, a world away from our family's business, but he had always been a decent man. He looked older, more tired than I remembered. "Can I come in for a minute, Leo?" he asked, his voice soft. We sat in my sun-drenched living room, making the kind of awkward small talk that families excel at. Finally, he got to the point. "I saw your father last week," he said, staring into his coffee cup. "He's a broken man. He lost the business, the house. He and Ethan are living in a small apartment now. He doesn't understand any of it." I just nodded, not knowing what to say. It was a tragedy, but it was a tragedy of his own making. "He keeps asking why you did it," Robert continued, finally looking at me. "In his mind, he was just doing what he thought your mother would have wanted." This caught me completely off guard. What does Mom have to do with any of this? She's been gone for 16 years. My uncle sighed, a deep, weary sound. He reached into the inside pocket of his tweed jacket and pulled out a faded, worn envelope. "Your mother gave this to me a month before she passed. She was so weak, but her mind was sharp. She made me promise to give it to your father if he ever seemed truly lost. I held on to it all these years. After everything that happened, I finally gave it to him last week. He let me read it." He slid the delicate envelope across the coffee table to me. "I think you should see it, too." My hands trembled as I took it. The paper was thin and fragile. I carefully unfolded the single sheet inside. It was a letter in my mother's elegant, familiar handwriting. It wasn't long. "My dearest Arthur, if you are reading this, it means my time has come, and you are struggling to find your way without me. I want you to promise me one thing, my love. Please look after our boys. I worry so much. Ethan, with his charm and his clever mind, is like a ship with a grand sail. He will find his way in the world easily. But please, my darling, watch out for our Leo. He has a sensitive heart. He feels things so deeply, and he carries the weight of the world on his shoulders. He needs your guidance and your protection. He's the one who will need you most." I read it once, then twice, then a third time, the words blurring through the tears welling in my eyes. All these years, I thought my father saw me as the strong, capable, and therefore neglectable one, while Ethan was the precious, brilliant one who needed all the investment. The truth was the exact opposite. My mother, in her wisdom, saw Ethan's superficial charm as a tool for survival. She saw my quiet, deep-feeling nature not as a weakness, but as a vulnerability that needed a father's love and protection. And my father, in his grief and his own narrow-minded, brutish interpretation of the world, had twisted her beautiful words into a grotesque mandate. He had interpreted "watch out for Leo" as a need to coddle and sideline me, to keep me safe in a small box labeled tools. He thought he was protecting me from the pressures of decision-making, and he pushed Ethan forward relentlessly, believing he was fulfilling her wish by building a kingdom for his strong son to inherit. His entire justification for a lifetime of crippling favoritism was built on a tragic, willful misreading of his dying wife's last wish. It wasn't an excuse. It didn't erase the decades of hurt, the lost opportunities, the gnawing feeling of being second best. But for the first time, I saw his actions not just as cruel, but as profoundly, devastatingly tragic. He wasn't just a bad father. He was a man who had failed at the one sacred promise he had made to the woman he loved. And that was a punishment, a self-inflicted wound, far greater and more permanent than any I could have ever devised. I still have that letter. I keep it in my desk drawer, and I take it out from time to time. It's a powerful, heartbreaking reminder that things are rarely as simple as they seem, that people's motivations are often tangled messes of love, grief, and profound misunderstanding. It doesn't absolve my father, not in the slightest, but it allows me to look back on the past not with the burning rage I once felt, but with a sad, quiet, and final understanding. I never spoke to my father or Ethan again. After my uncle's visit, there was truly nothing left to say. Their world had collapsed under the weight of their own choices, and my world was just beginning to be built on a new and solid foundation. Sometimes I wonder if my father ever truly understood the real meaning of my mother's words, if he ever recognized his tragic mistake. I doubt it. Some people are trapped inside the stories they tell themselves, and my father's story would always be that he was a benevolent king who had been betrayed by his ungrateful, vengeful son. But I have a new story now. It's a story I'm writing for myself, every single day. It's a story about a man who was told he was a tool and decided to become an architect instead. It's a story about how sometimes the most powerful and constructive thing you can do is walk away from a rotten foundation and build your own damn house, with your own two hands on your own terms. I stand by the window in my office sometimes, looking out at the sprawling city lights, and I think about that word my father was so obsessed with, legacy. He thought it was a tangible thing, something you could build with steel and concrete and pass down like a crown. He was so wrong. A legacy isn't what you leave for people. It's what you leave in people. It's the trust you build. It's the respect you earn. It's the knowledge you share. It's the people you lift up alongside you. My legacy is in the thriving careers of David and Carlos, and the other young engineers I get to mentor. That is something that can't be liquidated at a bankruptcy auction. My father always thought I was the black sheep of the family, the one who didn't fit, the one who strayed from the designated path. But he was wrong about that too. The black sheep hadn't been a sheep at all. He had just been a wolf, born into the wrong pack, patiently waiting for the right moment to break free and find his own territory. And now I'm finally running free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it connected with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to walk away to find your own worth? I'd be honored to read your story in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what I have to share next. Your support truly means the world to me.